Hey guys, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Life from the perspective of a military family member is way different than a civilian standpoint. Military children and family members give up their hopes and dreams to be able to stand by and support their service member, and it isn't an easy lifestyle for anyone to live. I hope that this podcast is able to help connect the military community and give others just a glimpse into what the military life is like from the perspective of spouses and children. Hi everyone, welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life. Today I'm here with Denetra, who has experienced many different roles in the military family. So welcome, how are you?
Oh, Gracie, I'm doing really good. I am very excited to be here and chat with you today about just different aspects and point of views, being a part or connected to the military. So I'm just happy to be here today.
Yay! So kind of start by just giving me an overview of how you are connected to the military life in so many different ways.
Yes. So I grew up a military child. My dad was in the Air Force for, I think, 28 years, a very long time. And then as I progressed in life, I married into the Army. My brother and my sister are both in the military. My sister was in the Army for a while, and my brother retired, I think 2 years ago from the Air Force. I married into the Army. I have 3 daughters that are now our military children. They're a little older now, but it was very interesting, being a military child and the way I was parented, and then changing that role into being the parent of military children.
Yeah.
And dealing with the very different ups and downs of it. And then I also have had the privilege of working as a teacher with military children. I live in here in Texas, and Fort Hood is one of the largest military installations. And so I taught a lot of different students that just came through. You're there for maybe 2 years and then you leave and you go to the next post or whatever. So it's just, so many different ways to look at it. And I see myself in experiences and feelings that I felt in my children, and also in a lot of these students that I teach at elementary. So a lot of the students that dealt with a lot of different emotions, and my dad is here and then tomorrow he's gone and he won't be back, and my mom is gone, things like that. So yeah, it's very unique. I have to say, it's very unique to see.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you never know, what's going to happen, what's going on. You don't, like you said, one day, mom or dad is here, the next they're gone, and you don't know when they're coming back. And, it's special because you can relate to them on that level of being like, I was in your shoes one day.
Right. And I think that is what really helped me to connect with a lot of my students. So I've taught like grades, 2nd grade through 5th grade, and I could connect with them because I knew how it felt like when my dad left. I remember back, I think it was around in the 1990, 1992. I'm kind of aging myself, but
it's okay.
1992, the Gulf War, my dad got deployed. And, what we see on the TV and we hear is horrible. And then, that's where your parent is going. And, is he coming back? Because we know that it is a danger zone. And the spouse that is left to maintain the home while the soldier is gone is under an immense amount of stress and emotional roller coaster as well. And then they're trying to keep everything like everything's fine. Everything's fine here at home for the children. But the children can read that, like they know. And I made it a point for myself when I became a parent, and my ex-husband would leave, he would go and he would be gone sometimes for like a year and a half. Like there was R&R, of course, but
right.
tried to like really keep the lines of communication open. Like if they needed to talk, like whatever was going on, they needed to talk or they had a meltdown or breakdown, like everything in the house stopped. It did not matter. It was like it stopped. And we would just talk about whatever was going on. And I didn't always have the answers or the right words to say, but I would just say, it's okay. It's okay to cry, or it's okay to feel this way. And we're going to work through it. Because where he would be deployed, sometimes we didn't talk to him for, a week or a couple of weeks, it just depended on where he was. So I would talk to my students, and the parent would usually come and be like, hey, the dad or the mom is going to be deploying next week. You might see a change in behavior. And so I knew exactly how to help support that because I was doing it at home. And then I also had experienced those feelings as a child myself. So,
yeah, because you just don't, you don't know. And especially with children going through elementary school, I think middle school, you can middle school is also hard because you're still learning your emotions and you're still trying to learn to cope with that. But elementary school, you're just so confused and so overwhelmed by these emotions that you're like, okay, well, my parent's gone, but like, I'm really sad about that. But I'm really happy to be here with my friends. And, there's just so many different things going on that it's hard to process at that age.
Right. And they don't understand. I don't want to speak for every child, but like a lot of the times they don't know what is going on and they don't know what that feeling is. And that's one thing people ask me, like military children are very, very resilient. Like they have to adapt like at the drop of a dime, and change is hard, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm like, even like as adults, like we don't really like change often,
yeah.
And I know from being an educator that students or children need structure. Right. So when, the routines are changed, they don't really know how to process that. And then sometimes you see those behaviors, like they start acting out or they shut down or they're not, producing like they were before, like their grades drop and things like that. And so I always, when I would conference with parents, you'd be like, please try to keep in mind, that remember dad left, he's been deployed. And we need to just have more conversations with kids, because they don't know how to process those, not at that age, how to process those feelings besides act out.
Yeah. And that's, that's the only way they know. Like you think back to when they're an infant, like they need something, they cry. Like that's, so they're still kind of going through those phases and that process of saying, okay, like this is what I'm feeling. This is what I need. This is how I can best communicate that. And nobody's perfect at that. Like I'm turning 21 and I'm still like, I still experience that. So, it's just a thing that we all go through in life, and we all process our emotions differently. My first thing, again, still in my 20s is to cry. So,
right. And that's
okay. Yeah, that's okay. Everyone processes differently.
Because my process is writing.
Yeah.
I write my feelings. I'm not a big talker or sharer of my feelings. So even as I wrote my first book, I was very, very, very nervous. I'm not sure if that ever really goes away, but I was very nervous because those are my feelings on paper and somebody is going to read them and they might like it. They may not like it, but those are my feelings. And so you have to be vulnerable, The first book that I wrote, Little Soldier, it's about exactly what we're talking about. The main character, Seth, his dad gets deployed, and it happens in the middle of the night because that's what I remember. I remember when my girls were small, like my ex-husband would leave, like we'd have to go drop them off on posts, and it's like 4 a.m, and we're waking up the kids to let's go and take dad on post. He's getting ready to leave. And so that, it's like that whole journey, like dad is leaving. And then mom is saying in the book, it's like mom is saying everything is fine, but she's crying. Then there's like a moment in the book where he can't he blows up and just has like a temper tantrum because he feels like he needs to protect his mom, because mom says it's okay, but she's crying, so it can't be okay. And dad's not here, so I'm going to try to protect my mom. But those are a lot of heavy emotions for a child to experience and try to deal with. My oldest daughter, Trinity, she, even still to this day, she's 22 now, but feels like she needs to be my protector. And I'm like, you just be, well, when she was younger, I was like, you just be a child. I just need you to be a child. I'll be okay. We got this. We're doing it together. But she would try to tell her sisters, like, didn't mom tell you to clean the room? Like, no, I can be mom.
Well, and it's so hard because, one parent leaves, like I can speak from an oldest child, kind of position, but,
Mm-hmm.
the parent leaves and, every single child in the house, no matter the age, like has to fill a role greater than, what they actually are. And, that goes to show how much military children mature at a quicker rate than the average child does.
Right. And then the impact is different for every child. Like they internalize that differently. So having 3 girls at that,
yes.
I'm like, one of them, like Trinity, like I was saying, she wanted to like take on the adult role and how can I help mom? Because I'm the oldest and I got to help. And then my middle daughter, she's very reserved. Victoria's very shy and very emotional. So she cried a lot. And I like I said, I expressed like through writing. And so I was like, I don't know what to do with all these tears. Like, I don't know. And then like my youngest daughter, Paris, she just kind of like withdrew. Like her dad started being deployed, like she was like 1.
Wow.
And so those first bonding years, she struggled with like, well, he's always been gone, kind of deal. And I'm like, but he's still your father. You still have to listen. You still have to be obedient and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So she had a hard time like connecting when he would come back because she always just knew him to be here for a while and then leave and then be back. And then, it was like that was a norm for her where Victoria and Trinity, they were used to him being around and then gone, Right. So even I remember sometimes in the classroom with some of my students, they would be like shining stars, and then a deployment would happen. And it wasn't even always just like parents. Sometimes it was like grandparents, because I did have like some younger parents, and sometimes it was like grandparents that were leaving. And because they were so close with their grandparent, like it affected them in the classroom a lot. And I remember one of my students had, those little bears that have like the little fatigue outfit on, and there's a picture on there where they are a little spot where there can be a picture of the soldier.
Yeah.
Like I bought a couple of those and just had them in my room. And if it felt like there was no picture, because, it just depended on the child, but
right.
I always just like allowed them, if they needed that little like comfort, they could go get it or bring something from home that helped them to feel comfort. I would allow that to happen in the classroom too, but it's just very different for every child,
It is. You said that obviously you're an author, you do a lot of writing,
yes,
but your main coping is writing and like, speaking from that vulnerable aspect and things like that. Does writing for you track back to you being a military child? Did you do a lot of writing throughout those days?
Honestly, when I was a child, no, I didn't do a lot of writing. I was very shy when I was in school, and the environment that I grew up in, it was just like, you don't talk about it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't as common as it is now, like talk about your feelings, what's going on at home stays at home, that type of thing. So I didn't. But when I became a military spouse, that's really when I started to get into writing, because moving a lot, and I was still very shy. So it was like moving a lot, I didn't have friends. I would go to Missouri and I didn't know anybody in Missouri, and I have 3 little kids. So
it's a lot.
It was a lot. And I just started journaling and writing out my emotions, but I do keep my journals. And so I will go back, like, what is today? What is today? February or March 18th, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so I was like, February, nope, don't take it back.
I know, February's gone somehow.
So I'll go back a number of years and see what I was feeling or what I wrote on March 18th or close to it. Cause I don't write every day, but I write a lot, but like I will go back and look, sometimes even just to remind myself of how far I've come or how I have processed. I might find myself in like a similar situation or having similar emotions back 4 years ago, and how I coped with it then. How could I cope? Oh yeah, you did do this, so maybe try that and you'll feel better, or something like that. I think that it's really reflective and eye-opening. So journaling just helps me in so many different ways, for motivation, for reminders, even ideas for books. Like I go back and I look and I'm like, gosh, I remember when Trinity experienced that, or when Trinity was feeling this way, or Victoria, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to make sure I put that in my book. Or like in Little Soldier, for example, there is a part in there where the mom and Seth, the son, are watching a movie and having popcorn. That was like one of the biggest things that we would do. Every Friday night, we would have a dance party, and we would watch movies and eat popcorn. So I like incorporated some of those things into the book as well, because that's what helped to just like, make you feel, how movies and things like that just make you feel together as a family and stuff like that. So,
No, I love that. And, even going back and, because you remind yourself of things, you forget that things happen. And, I love journaling too. It's so hard because I always put so much pressure on it. Like, you have to stay consistent. You have to journal every day at the same time and like all this stuff. And then you'd miss a day. And then it's like, oh, no. Okay, like, like I'd force myself to backtrack to that day, write down that day before I could even start on the next, like the current day. And so, putting so much pressure on that. So, I would like just get out of it then, because it would feel more like a chore and a task than, something that's, calming. Yes, therapeutic. And, but it's so special to like go back, because you forget that things happen, everything, like we just said, like it's already March, like let's be real. Let's be real. You forget that things happen, and time just keeps moving, and you can't stop that. So, just even like the small little memories, like you were saying, of movie nights and popcorn and dance parties, like, those are things that you can incorporate into your books and say, hey, like, this is just something that like we did.
Right.
And maybe it gives inspiration to another military family to say, maybe this is our next tradition that we start.
Right. And that is, kind of my hope in the books that I write, because I've written 2. The first one is Countdown to Daddy. And the second one that was just released this year is, I'm sorry, backwards. Little Soldier was first, and Countdown to Daddy was released this year. And really what I want to do is through my books, I want people or civilians, even military families, to see that they're not alone. Sometimes we feel alone, but from a child's point of view.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think as the spouse and even the soldier, like, we're just trying to maintain home. And sometimes we don't stop to think about, like, well, how is Denetra feeling about everything that's going on? Or moving from a household that has 2 adults to 1, that's a lot for the spouse to handle, and so
Yeah.
I check in, hey, Denetra, how you doing? I'm good. Okay, but I got to make sure all the bills are paid, and I got to go to work, and I got to make lunch.
Yeah. Life doesn't stop.
Right. And sometimes it's hard to purposefully stop and take that moment to spend with your child, as in having that conversation of, like, I know mom or dad has been gone for about a month. How are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Do you want to write, like, things of that nature? Not on purpose. I don't think any parent does that on purpose. It's just that they're juggling so many things. My daughters are what we call stair steppers. So there's like a 2-year and then a 1-year gap between them. And so
Yeah.
I was like, I had a baby on the hip, one in the stroller and one in the carriage. It's like
Yeah.
trying to, I was just trying to try to keep normalcy in the home. And I had to learn, like, okay, I was a young mom, I was 21, 22 when I had Trinity and married.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to figure it out, and I had to think back, like we were talking about, think back. What was one of the things you wish your parents would have done when you were in this position? And it was talk to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was talk to me, and I didn't know it at the time, but I as I reflect back, that's what it was. And so when I first started to think about even writing Little Soldier, I was like, I am Little Soldier. My girls are Little Soldier. My students are Little Soldier. Why am I not writing about this?
Yeah.
So that's
And
how it
you're
all.
able to relate to so many,
Yeah,
all of these kids, your students, your actual kids on so many different levels
right,
because you've experienced it and you see it.
right. And I incorporated my students' input in Little Soldier.
Yeah.
I read it to them. I was like, hey guys, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And can I read it to you? And they're like, oh yeah, Miss Moore, we want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I read it to them, and they were like, I know, because when my mom left, I mean, so many rich conversations just from that. And that was confirmation to me that this needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like, I have a hard time, or back then anyway, I had a hard time finding books that were about military life.
Oh, yeah. My dad, he deployed when I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking like 11 years ago, 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
And even then, like, no books. Like,
Mm-mm.
there's like, my dad, he was unfortunately injured in Afghanistan. And so, after the injury happened, like, my music teacher, who was also a military spouse,
Mm-hmm.
she gave us books. And it was like one of the first times we held books, my sister and I, that were for military kids, like,
Right.
explaining the process. But even then, it wasn't necessarily like, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the books, but I remember
Right.
like one of them
Yeah.
being like military ABCs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not necessarily, saying, this is a situation that you might be in. This is how you might be feeling, and relating that. And so I've seen, especially with starting the podcast and going into this community of people and connecting, there's books out there and there's incredible, authors out there making books specifically for military kids, and, not even just military kids, but like also you said civilian kids,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a glimpse into our life as military kids and
Right.
what we go through.
Right. Because I was like I was saying, I was really shy. So I didn't make friends easy. And so then when we would leave, we would move somewhere else. I didn't know how to make friends. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I was like, well, how long are we even going to be friends? Because I'm going to move again. You know what I mean? And so I had a
Right.
hard time. And Gracie, really, to be honest, like for even as an adult, I had a hard time making friends when we would move somewhere new because I still had those same behaviors and securities of just do what you're supposed to do, stick to yourself, take care of your kids. It's going to be fine. But we need the connection. We need to have those conversations with, it doesn't even necessarily have to be other military spouses, but it helps if it is. But
Right. They
someone
know
else,
what you're going through.
they can relate, right? But just being able to talk to somebody about what's going on, because it's a lot. There's good things. I'm like, there's good things and
Right.
there's heavy things, but we need to be able to talk about all of them,
Yeah.
So I had a hard time like making friends other places because I'm just not like the type of person that's like, hey, how are you? I'm your new neighbor.
Right.
I just I wasn't like that. Mostly just because I knew we would leave and that I would make this connection and then it would break, because as a child, we didn't have the internet and we didn't have social media or phones.
Right.
I was like, when I was 10, I didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So I couldn't just call. Like, we had to write letters.
Yeah.
And at 10, I'm not writing letters. You know what I mean? At 10, I wasn't writing letters.
And then sometimes you have to hope it even gets there.
Right.
It could get lost in the mail, and then, or somebody moves and doesn't tell you their new address. Like,
right. So because you didn't know it, right? Like, because I just know that I'm moving from Colorado to Florida. That's all I know.
Yeah, exactly. My gosh. It's so, even like back to when I was 10, like we didn't really have fun. Social media was just, Instagram came out in like 2012. Like, I was 10. So a 10-year-old was not going to be on Instagram. So, but even then, like going back and, 8 years later, reconnecting with these people, like 6 years later, reconnecting with my friends that, and it's weird because you have to kind of, I'm a little shy too sometimes, but you have to kind of like break out of that bubble and say, we were best friends. We used to talk every day, like, and sending that initial message and being like, hey, I'm Gracie, like, nice to kind of meet you again. Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. I want to meet you again. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. But you're so right. Even like when a new student would come, because there was like periods in the year where it was like you just knew students were leaving and students were coming, because that was like the cycle.
Yes.
It was like the deployment
mostly
cycle.
Around Christmas time is a huge PCS, and
PCS
the end of the year. Yes.
Exactly. We would come back from like a Christmas or winter break and you'd get this, new students like at your door. And I always was like, so where are you guys coming from? Like I knew, just because the community, it's a military community. So we knew that they were coming probably, and we have to think about, okay, so what were they learning in Georgia?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in Texas, it's way different in Texas.
Oh, yes.
So it's like, okay, so we need to do that. But I am huge, even in the role that I work in now. Like I support teachers now, but I am really, really big about building relationships. And I think that not only because that's a good thing to do, but because it feeds my heart, because I had such a hard time making relationships as a kid.
Yeah.
And so now that's like my very first thing, like even like with my students, with teachers, I'm like, so what are you into? Like I'm very much now more outgoing than I was when I was your age or younger. But now I'm like, I know how important that is. And because there's such an influx of students coming and leaving, that I don't get that fulfillment of watching them go through elementary school to middle school to high school, because they
Yeah.
leave. They go to another or state or country sometimes. And I want to make the most of that little bit of time that I may have with them. They might only be there for 2 years, but they would come back to my classroom, like they were third grade, and then they would go to fourth grade and come back on Meet the Teacher night and be like, hey,
Yeah.
and I just loved that. Because I felt like I made some kind of impact on their life if they came back to see me when I wasn't their teacher anymore. And usually by fifth grade, they were gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it was about a 2-year cycle.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
time to move again. And so now that I'm disconnected from the military as far as a dependent, I do that with teachers. And I try to build relationships with them first, and then we can get into whatever I need to support them with. But that is one thing that I am grateful for, the experiences that I've had with teaching military children, is because that's where I get that, like, I want to build relationship with you or make connections with you, because I know it's hard as a military child to do that. Because I was real shy and I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah. I always, so I've moved twice within, my dad being in the military because he had to do an early retirement. But moving from Ohio to Texas, one, like you said, curriculum is so different.
Exactly.
But, making new friends, like, I had never changed schools before. I was 9 years old, and this was my first change of school. And so it's like, I don't know how to make friends. Like, I was in the same classes with all my friends from kindergarten up until fourth grade,
Right.
And so I was so thankful, walking into my first day of school in Texas at Fort Sam and having, they pair you with a buddy basically and
Right.
say, hey, this student is in the same class you're going to be in. Like, she can help you along the way and, kind of show you around the school, be your first best friend,
Right.
and then, I was so thankful to have her in fourth grade when I changed schools. Cause again, that was in the middle of the year. So like, that's another challenge in itself. But then I was fortunate enough to be that person for someone else in sixth grade, and say, hey, like, welcome to this school. Like, I'm going to show you around. I'm going to introduce you to all my friends. Like, it's just so special to start making those connections.
It is. It is. And then like already having it set up so you don't have, if you are shy, or this is all brand new, change is hard.
Yeah.
So it's like having somebody already designated to be your buddy, to help
Absolutely.
you, that's also, you're a child, not an adult or the counselor, or, because sometimes it's like you're going to the counselor, then it's almost like, is that a bad thing that I'm going to the counselor?
Right.
But to have a buddy there to kind of show you the ropes, and it's like, I've only been here for 2 years. Like in your case, came in fourth grade and you were able to pay it forward in sixth grade to another student, like, I totally understand. Where'd you come from? And sometimes even those connections, like, oh, what? I lived there too.
Yeah. And it's so special to, even sometimes those people you don't talk to anymore. Like, a lot of military relationships, whether that be friends, whatever, it's their first season in your life, and then you PCS and you don't talk to that person ever again. But, sometimes you're able to keep those connections, and it's even more special saying, hey, remember, when you first showed me around, or I first showed you around, and, this is how we met, like,
Right. That's how we met. Exactly. And, some are very fortunate where they become like lifelong friends, lifelong friends, and can go back and be like, remember in sixth grade when I was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I was your buddy. I just think that that's awesome. And I think that's also what makes like the military life so unique, because we have to, as children, dependents, spouse, um, we have to adapt to change pretty quickly.
Right.
And I think about where I live now and my two neighbors on the side, like I get a new neighbor every 2 years, you know, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm just like, wow. I can tell like when one of the soldiers is deploying, like that, like, all of the movement and the moving trucks that come, or there's one car now instead of two cars, and stuff
Right.
like that. I was like, you have to be a very flexible and understanding person to be a part of the military community, and I think that we need to teach that and model that for our children, because they don't understand. One of the things I even wrote in Little Soldier was like, dad's going to be gone for a year. And how does a child calculate a year really? Probably by major holidays.
Right.
So, I'm like, so that's a Christmas, like in the dialogue, I'm like, so that's a Christmas and a birthday, Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Because kids don't think like that. It's like a year, that's super long. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I've been through school and now I'm starting a new grade and okay, so they're going to come back in the middle of my 5th grade year when he left when I was 4th grade. That sounds like 2 years to me.
I
know. So, just teaching them that it's different, it's unique, it builds character, and you're going to be stronger for it later. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Just showing that and keeping the lines of communication open, more than it was before, because kids don't know how to process it. So we got to keep the lines open more. I love things like FRG groups and the different outings that they try to get the kids together, to
Right.
do things so that they can have someone to connect with that is also going through the same thing. Or if they're in the same unit, then, majority of that unit has a deployed spouse or partner, so everybody's in the same boat,
Yeah.
And, it gives the kids opportunities to get together, allows the parents or the dependents to kind of lean on each other. And how are you tackling this? How are you doing that? Because a lot of the spouses are young, and they don't know. They're just living. I'm trying to figure out life, and I got married, and now my soldier's gone. So I'm trying to figure out life like that. And
Yeah.
I remember being part of FRG group, and we had some young moms that didn't know how to balance it at the time. It was a check. I was like, they didn't know how to budget, period,
Yeah.
whether it's a checkbook or I don't know how much groceries cost. And, all of those things. It's like, we just have to come together so that we can talk about it, because we can learn from each other, even from the kids.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the last thing I always like to ask is, what piece of advice would you give to someone else, whether that be a military child or a military spouse?
I would say my piece of advice would be to find a way to connect, find a way to connect with others around you, or stay connected with support systems from where you left. And my other piece of advice, to be patient, because it only lasts for a while. And it only lasts for a while, and things are always going to get better. The military community life is, like I said, very unique, but yet so rewarding. So be patient and just stay connected to whatever method that may be for you to stay grounded and
Absolutely.
And to be okay. Because I think we just have to remember to take care of ourselves, and the military community is always taking care of others, but we got to take care of ourselves too. So finding a way to do that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Denetra, for being on and sharing so many different incredible aspects of the military life. And where can listeners find you and find your books?
Oh, sure. So, of course, I have social media. I'm working really hard to build up my social media community. So I have Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at more.books. Twitter is very similar, but it's at morebooks2, the number 2, read. What else is there? Facebook. Facebook, that'll be More Books on Facebook. And then, of course, my email is morebooks2read at Gmail. You can email me at any time. I love hearing from fellow military people, children. It's all great. You can get order my books through me that way. I did self-publish this last one, so I'm working on getting it like on Amazon and things of that nature, but you could just contact me and we can definitely get you the book that way. I am hosting a book giveaway in April.
Yay!
So I will be doing 4 giveaways of Countdown to Daddy. Starting on April 1st, I'm going to do 1 a week. So you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook to find out more information about that. I think that's all of my contacts and ways that you can get connected with me or get the book, or either one of the books, Little Soldier or Countdown to Daddy.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on.
Thank you, Gracie. This has just been such a pleasure. This is a great conversation. I love it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Make sure to set a reminder for every Tuesday to listen to a new episode. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Grace of a Military Child and Life. If you have any questions or want to be on the podcast, send a message to one of our social media platforms or email grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. See you next week.